Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Time-Crossed Lovers in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, A Fated Meeting. The aftermath of the coup and his uncle's execution left Dmitri was left feeling empty. He truly wishes that it hadn't come to all this. He and Rufus never really got along, but to cause such suffering, to go so far. It was only when a knight reported that some mercenaries Rufus hired were approaching the city that Dmitri felt alert again. So, Dmitri set out to confront them, with Didu at his side. "Are you sure this is wise, Your Highness? If something were to happen to you so soon after the coup, the results could be catastrophic." Dmitri sighed. "While that is certainly true, my friend, I think we can deal with some mercenaries without too much trouble." For a long time, Dmitri did not hold much respect for mercenaries. Lately though, he had begun to see why some would choose such a profession. Once they realize their employer is dead and will not be paying them, it is very likely they will leave without a fight. It would be easy to say his change in attitude was a result of befriending Shay, but that didn't quite feel accurate. Before Dmitri could dwell too much on his opinion of mercenaries, Didu called out to him. "Your Highness, do you see that?" When Dmitri focused on the road ahead, he saw figures laying across it. "What is going on?" Dmitri immediately urged his horse forward. As he got closer, Dmitri realized, based on their weapons and attire, the people in the road were likely the mercenaries he had been planning on dealing with. What could have caused this? Dmitri dismounted to get a better look and saw that none of the people were breathing. It did not look like there had been a battle, but people do not just suddenly drop dead. Especially not in groups. "Your Highness, look over there." Didu had been right behind him and was gesturing towards farther down the road. Dmitri could faintly see someone riding a horse in the distance. All he could really make out was that the person had blue hair. Should we pursue whoever that is? If they were able to kill so many in such a short time, they could be a danger. While that seemed like a wise idea, Dmitri didn't feel threatened by whoever it was. Let's leave them be for now. If they wanted to attack us, they could have laid in wait for us to arrive. Not only that, but they did us a favor by handling the mercenaries. They probably wouldn't be able to catch up at this point anyway. Let's go back to Didu. There are many things that will require our attention. After a long day of meetings and decision-making, Dmitri is finally able to go to bed, not that he expects a restful night. He anticipates nightmares waiting for him, either about the events of the coup and execution or the tragedy of Duskar. Still, he needs to let his body rest. When he finally does sleep, Dmitri's dreams, while strange, are not nightmares. There were disjointed images and slight alterations to things he'd been present for. Running with Claude and Edelgard through the forest, but instead of finding Shay, they made it to a village. There was a woman, he couldn't make out her features, just the impression that she was mesmerizing. He couldn't stop looking at her, whether they were on a battlefield or walking in Gareg Mach Monastery. When Dmitri woke up, he was filled with a sense of longing. What for, he couldn't say. It just felt like something important was missing. A year later, Dmitri finds himself waking up in Duskar, from another one of his strange dreams. Despite his efforts to remember or see more clearly, Dmitri still has no idea what the woman looks like. He has images in his head of being with her in Gareg Mach's dining hall, training grounds, cathedral, the Blue Lion's classroom, even the Goddess Tower, yet her face eludes him. Dmitri wants to know why the dreams have persisted for so long. He has them almost every night, and while they are certainly more pleasant than the nightmares that used to plague him, it bothers Dmitri that he doesn't even know who he's dreaming of. Or why, for that matter. It's best not to dwell on such things now. Dmitri has too many important matters to focus on to spare too much time on confusing dreams. He needs to finish preparations for his speech. Didu and Rodrigue had been working very hard to restore Duskar, and he needs to do his part. A celebration was being held in honor of all the rebuilding that had been happening, and he has to finish preparing. The journey from Fhirdiad had exhausted him though, and Dmitri ended up falling asleep against a tree. The spot he was sitting in happened to be overlooking a flower field. It was a rather beautiful sight, but he should really be going. He shouldn't have even succumbed to a nap. Dmitri got up to head back towards where Didu and the others were. He was likely to get an earful for sneaking off, but Dmitri had needed the privacy. Before Dmitri could do more than stand up, he heard rustling from the nearby trees. Cautious of a possible assassin, he crouched down to use the tree as cover. It did not take long for someone to exit the forest. It was a woman with blue hair and a grey cloak, though the angle she was standing at hid her face from him. Dmitri needed to see her face. He has no idea why, but he needed to. Everything about her seemed achingly familiar. She was looking out at the field of flowers, seemingly oblivious to his presence. If he moved just a bit, he might be able to see her face without getting spotted. Unfortunately, his efforts were immediately undermined when his knee snapped a twig when he was shifting positions. The snap echoed around them. The woman whirled around in his direction, her hand instantly going to the sword at her hip. Her eyes widened when she caught sight of him. Instead of charging at him, she took a couple of steps back. Dmitri was having trouble concentrating. The woman before him, she was the one in his dreams. Every hazy memory suddenly became clear. Her mesmerizing smile after they rescued Flane, her tears after her father's death, her kind, warm hands. All of it. The two of them, they were in love. He proposed to her in the Goddess Tower. She said yes, even offering him a ring in return. What had happened? How could he ever forget? Professor. She looked even more surprised as Dmitri finally found the will to stand up. You remember? How could you possibly? She took a couple more steps back. Please don't. Dmitri reached out to her, though he didn't move further in fear that she would run. Why, what's going on, Professor? I am not your professor, as far as everyone knows I never was. Her eyes dart to the side. She looks like she's about to bolt. No. He cannot let her. If she leaves, Dmitri is sure he'll never see her again. Byleth, please don't. Her eyes widen at the use of her given name. Dmitri, Byleth swallowed before going silent. She looked as confused as he felt. Do you remember too, Byleth? He needs to know, he needs to hear it directly from her. Remire, the Officers' Academy, the Goddess Tower, everything. Byleth is silent for a moment before nodding. I remember. It looks like the admission pains her, he's not sure why. It's not just him then. Byleth recalls it all too. What changed? How did this happen? I think it started with a job my mercenary band took. Byleth looks to the side in thought. We still succeeded, but another mercenary band was there. Instead of wiping them out, one member survived. That's at least where the differences started. She turned back to him. As for how we got here, I don't know. I have a theory, but I don't know. Our time at the Officers' Academy was different too. We didn't stay there for the full year and during a mission we rescued. Oh, that is a rather large change. Who did you rescue? We saved Monica. Byleth glares at the name. The real one, not the one from when we rescued Flane. Consequently, Solon was found out much sooner. What could have caused this? Why do we know about it? No one was acting like anything was off. I don't know. Byleth signed. Like I said, all I have is a theory. What is your theo? Before he can finish, a shout rings through the forest, causing him to jump. Your Majesty. The others must be looking for him. They don't have time for this. Please come with me. We can finish this conversation in a more comfortable location. He steps closer to Byleth and gently takes one of her hands. They are just as warm as he remembers. Byleth tightens her grip on his hand. I don't think that's a good idea. She won't look him in the eye. She has the mask of the Ashen Demon on again, but the trembling he can feel through their interlocked hands give away her emotions. Beloved, what's wrong? The term of endearment seems to jolt her back to reality. Byleth leans into him for a moment before backing away from him again. I don't belong with you and the other Blue Lions anymore. Byleth graced him with a sad smile. I have to get back to my father and the other mercenaries. No. She can't just walk away. He's been dreaming about her for a year. After committing the unforgivable sin of forgetting her, Dmitri cannot just let her leave his life. Byleth had only taken a few steps before he reaches her. She stiffens a bit when he embraces her from behind, but quickly relaxes. Byleth still smells like smoky campfires. How could he have forgotten? Dimitri, her voice is near trembling. I cannot go with you. As far as everyone knows, I'm just a low-born mercenary. You are a king, we can't just go places together. At best it'll make people suspicious. He doesn't care about that. Byleth's hands slowly remove his arms from her, and she turns to face him. Things are different now, Dimitri. We can't just go back to the way things were. She looks out at the flower field. Besides, it's not so bad, this new life. Duskar is healing, I've heard rumors of Rodrigue, so he must be alive. You have both eyes again. Byleth turns back to him. I even have my father back. So much that was lost has been regained. Dimitri hadn't considered that. It just seems hollow now if Byleth is not there. Your Majesty. The others must be getting closer. Byleth begins to walk away. Dimitri rushes to catch up with her, taking her arm to prevent her from fleeing. Please don't leave. What is everyone going to say if they find the king of Faerghus with the Ashen Demon, Dimitri? She looks back at the forest, likely searching for an escape route. I think my father is going to accept a contract in Empire territory soon. I'll be more useful there, where I can send you information. It might be coming later than it did before, but war is upon us. Byleth takes a deep breath before extracting her arm from his grip. Instead of leaving, as he'd feared, Byleth steps closer. Before Dimitri can do anything, Byleth's lips are pressed against his cheek. I'll send information as soon as I am able. Hopefully between that and the knowledge we already have, the war will not last for 5 years. Then she's gone. Dimitri makes for the trees. His beloved is faster than him, but she couldn't have gone far. There you are, Your Majesty. Dimitri turned to find Sylvain not too far away. We've been calling for you. Sylvain makes it way over to Dimitri's side. Why didn't you answer? Dimitri glances at the forest. Byleth is probably too far away now to catch sight of. Ah, I was taking a nap, then got distracted by the sights. I apologize for causing any worry. Sylvain chuckles. Nah, it's fine. It's not like you went too far anyway. He looks out at the flower field. Can't say I blame you for getting distracted though. The flowers are a pretty nice sight. Mesmerizing. That wasn't supposed to happen. Byleth had heard about the celebration taking place in Duskar and had wanted to see it, even if only from a distance. Didu had always told her such wonderful things about the flowers in his homeland. She'd just wanted to see them for herself. Dimitri though, she hadn't expected to see him, much less talk with him. Now she's running through the forest trying to get away. Byleth couldn't hear him pursuing her, but he's always been persistent. It is unlikely he's given up. She's lucky that they hadn't seen each other a year ago when she'd briefly been near Fhirdiad. Byleth had been able to take out a band of mercenaries that she had overheard discussing going to the city on orders from the regent. If Dimitri had seen her then, she's not sure what would have happened. Byleth hadn't thought that Dimitri would remember, before. She's not sure how much he recalls, but at the very least he remembers what they were to each other. She'd been prepared to watch him from afar, and help where she could, but clearly that wasn't going to pan out. She wishes Suthies was capable of helping her more. Unfortunately, her friend was near always asleep. They would only speak when Byleth visited the throne in her dreams. Even then, Suthies could barely communicate, only saying a few spaced-out words. They suspect that Byleth needs to be faced with certain death, before Suthies could fully awaken. The last time it happened, Byleth nearly took a fatal blow from an axe for Edelgard. Which, now that she thinks about it, is ironic all things considered. Despite their theory, Suthies had practically begged her not to risk her life unnecessarily. The knowledge Suthies may possess could be invaluable, but the goddess firmly believed that Byleth's life was more important. Byleth isn't too worried though, as a mercenary death was always close by. Something would eventually happen that could wake her friend up. It was just a matter of time, especially with war brewing. As Byleth exited the forest, she finally allowed herself to slow down. Seeing Dimitri had been unexpected. She hadn't known what to think when she woke up in what appeared to be her past. It had certainly been a shock to see her father alive and well. It was very difficult to restrain herself from outwardly reacting. She had to pretend like nothing was wrong. Though she still hadn't figured out what had happened with that one mercenary the night Byleth had woken up. His power was odd, but she hadn't seen him again and there were more important things to worry about. Though 6 months later when they were spending the night in Remire, Byleth could barely contain her excitement. Even if Dimitri and the others wouldn't remember, she would. With her knowledge they might have been able to prevent so many things. Flane's kidnapping, her father's death, the war. Byleth was heartbroken when the house leaders didn't come. As the days went by, she'd accepted that she'd probably never see Dimitri again. Their original meeting had been so unprecedented that Byleth couldn't bring herself to hope that it would somehow repeat itself. She'd thought she'd steeled herself to everything, but seeing Dimitri after so long had proven her wrong. It was fine though. As a mercenary, a teacher, and an army's tactician, she had accomplished more difficult tasks. Byleth would just have to get through this hurdle too. Seeing Dimitri had shaken her resolve. He was as earnest as she remembered, but it would not happen again. She only gave in as much as she had because of the shock. If they ever meet like that again, she'd harden herself more. She'd hopefully given him a firm farewell. A final kiss in the name of what they once could have been. It was better this way, for the both of them. It's not like Byleth is alone. She has her father and Suthies again. Alois even tracked them down not too long ago, saying he'd heard rumors of Geralt and wanted to serve under his former captain again. There are also the other members of their mercenary band, who are all excited about the pay coming in from the Empire. Byleth has a lot. She shouldn't want more. Despite everything, she still misses Dimitri. It doesn't matter though, it can't matter. It's just not realistic anymore. She's not a respected teacher, his army's strategist, or future archbishop. Byleth is a mercenary and Dimitri is a king. Outside of Ash and Ingrid's fables, kings and mercenaries do not end up together. Chapter 2, Pleasant Dreams. When Dimitri and Sylvain returned to the others, there had only been a minor scolding from Ingrid about him sneaking off to nap, and Dimitri's speech went well. It was only after things had calmed down that Dimitri thought of Shay. Shay was a mercenary who had a grudge against another mercenary for killing his companions. Shay wanted to hunt down and kill the Ashen Demon. Shay wanted to kill Byleth, his beloved. That was a problem. Dimitri will have to somehow convince Shay to give up his vendetta. Despite what the rumors say about the Ashen Demon, his beloved is not a monster. She is a good and kind person. His friends probably won't have the best opinion of Byleth either, come to think of it. Her reputation is not the best. Dimitri will have to figure out how to fix that. As much as it pains him to admit it, maybe Byleth was right to leave. As much as he wishes she was with him, there would undoubtedly be opposition to their closeness. As far as everyone else was concerned, Byleth was a dangerous wild card, an emotionless husk who wouldn't hesitate to kill if she was offered enough coin. They'd have no reason to believe she was loyal to him. Still, Dimitri would like to keep tabs on her. Knowing she was safe would hopefully make the separation easier to bear. If he sends some scouts out to find information on Geralt's mercenaries, he might also get to see Byleth all that sooner. Dimitri needs to see her again, she belongs at his side, and he is nothing without her. When Dimitri goes to bed that night, he expects to have another dream about a memory of his beloved. Instead, he finds himself gazing up at a throne. It looks a lot like the Holy Tomb where he got confirmation that Edelgard was the Flame Emperor. It was a lot darker though, and there was someone small sitting on the throne. He couldn't make out their features as they were shrouded by shadows. More importantly, standing at the bottom of the steps leading up to the throne is Byleth. She spun around to face him, eyes widening in shock. "How did you get here?" The figure on the throne moves. If they speak, he cannot hear anything. Byleth, however, seems to get some kind of message as she looked back and forth between him and the figure a few times. "Dimitri," she sounds so tired. "Beloved, are you all right?" Dimitri walks to her side. He reaches out to take her hand, but she shrugs him off and looks at him sadly. "Please just move on with your life, I'm not worth you finding your way here." "What does that mean?" "Things are better for you in this new life." Those 5 years that left you feeling so guilty and monstrous never happened. Your father figure is alive, you have an advantage in the coming war. You can freely be happy here. I could never be happy without you. Dmitri needs her to understand. He just needs her. Dmitri cannot even conceive of being happy without her. We were happy before all this happened. Are you really fine with acting like it never happened? I don't see any other way. It's not like we can go back. They don't need to go back. Surely, they can find some way to be together. Byleth takes a few steps backwards, a wary look on her face. He needs to calm down, pushing her will get him nowhere. If he presses her too hard, his beloved will hold to what she's been saying more. They fundamentally disagree and he cannot simply make her see things his way. He needs to work on getting her to understand his point of view. Dmitri runs a hand through his hair. When we saw each other before, you said you had a theory about what happened. Please tell me what it is. Maybe if they can understand how this happened, they can more easily choose their next course of action. Possibly even turn this do-over into their advantage. Byleth's eyes dart to the throne for a moment. Before I answer that, I need to ask you a question. She turns back to him. How much do you remember? I remember meeting you at Remire Village, the year at the Officers' Academy, the 5 years I spent in darkness, your return. If I'm not mistaken, my memory ends the night I proposed to you at the Goddess Tower. Why he can't remember anything after that, Dmitri isn't sure. Though he supposes there might be gaps in his memory that he isn't aware of. That's good, you remember most of the important things then. Byleth pauses, then briefly looks back towards the figure on the throne again. My memory goes farther than yours. After your coronation there were a few months of peace. Nothing's of note happened until those dark mages Edelgard was working with, like the man who replaced Tamash, started appearing again. That's not good. Dmitri had hoped they'd dealt with all their enemies during the war. We eventually tracked them down to their home, Shamhala. We brought an army and attacked, but something happened while we were there. Her voice had gone very quiet. I don't know exactly what happened, but you and I followed someone into a laboratory. Something happened, an explosion I think, and the next thing I knew, I was here. Byleth moved to lean against a nearby pillar. I think I mentioned this before, but that night that I first went back to, we had a mission. It ended differently than it had the last time. Dmitri moved to stand beside her. What was the difference? Such information might help them. Our mission had us going up against another mercenary group. They refused to stand down. I even heard a few of them bragging about how they were going to kill me. Dmitri clenched his fists in anger. I wiped them out when they tried, but that's where things changed. Originally, I killed them all, but this time one of them survived. He displayed a power I had never seen before and came at me again. Was she referring to Shay? Byleth shook her head. It wasn't enough to beat me, but unlike last time, it bought him his survival. I was alerted to the fact that our mission was complete, so I walked away. You walked away? Byleth tilted her head to the side in confusion. Why not? I've never needlessly killed, and the job was done. I had no reason to continue the fight. Either way, I believe whatever happened in Shamhala caused this, and given the timing and circumstances it is likely that mercenary is somehow involved. If Shay is involved, I don't think it is knowingly. He's been worried about losing control and turning on us like Tamash/Solon did. Dmitri grabs Byleth's hand to give it a gentle squeeze. His heart soars when she doesn't shrug him off again. At the moment he is loyal to me, I can make sure he doesn't join the enemy. Power itself isn't good or evil, what matters is how a person chooses to use it. That mercenary works for you. Byleth's hands are trembling. How did that happen? Dmitri takes a deep breath and gives his beloved's hand another squeeze. When Edelgard, Claude, and I were running for Remire Village, we found Shay instead. He helped us fight off the bandits and Lady Rhea let him become a student at the Officers' Academy as a reward. He joined the Blue Lions class, and I ended up hiring him after the academy was closed. So, this Shay replaced me then. Byleth gave a sad laugh. I shouldn't be surprised, there had to be a reason the three of you never came. Dmitri wrapped his arms around her, trapping her between his body and the pillar. No one could ever replace you, beloved. Why can't they just be like this? It feels so good to just be standing here with her, to be holding her. She fits so perfectly in his arms, it feels so right. Byleth leans in and hides her face in his chest. It doesn't matter. What's done, is done. We cannot go back, and we must accept reality for what it is. She takes a breath. Things cannot return to the way they were, Dimitri. Byleth ducks out of his hold and levels him with her blank stare. Dimitri dislikes it when she puts that shield between them. Things don't have to go back to the way they were, beloved. We could make them better. They had so many advantages now. They knew what dangers were really out there and could plan for them. Yes, things were not ideal, but they were not hopeless either. We have to be realistic. A war is brewing, and that is what we need to focus on. Our time and energy will be better spent that way. She takes a few steps back. Our time at Garag Mach Monastery together is over, we have to learn to live with that. Byleth turns from him completely. If you ignore the dreams, if you stop dwelling on them and all they entail, they will stop. She moves a bit, and he can see the side of her face. Please move on so you can eventually find happiness. The world was shifting around them, but Dimitri doesn't pay it any mind. He needs to get to Byleth. He has to make her see that she is wrong. No, I won't. Suddenly Dimitri found himself sitting up in bed. He'd woken up and left his beloved behind again. It doesn't matter. Byleth said that if he stopped dwelling on the dreams they would cease. He'll keep her in his thoughts, so instead they will continue. If they continue, he might get to see her again as he just had. They will be together again, he will accept no other outcome. Byleth turned from the spot Dimitri had been standing in to face Suthies. What was that about? What is happening? I'm, still, not sure of the specifics myself. I suspect that mercenary with the Agarthan abilities is somehow connected to it. This would be so much easier if Suthies wasn't mostly asleep. That makes sense, given what we know and what Dimitri said. Byleth sighed. Why did you let him come here? Dimitri could only have made it to the throne if he had been thinking about her, and if Suthies had not only allowed it, but opened the door, so to speak, for him. The two of you needed to talk. I understand how you feel, but nothing will happen if you ignore his and your feelings. Byleth knows that. She knows that. She just needs time. Seeing Dimitri just makes everything harder. She needs to get past this. She cannot cave every time she sees Dimitri. It's not good for either of them. Byleth wakes to the sound of Eloise and her father's snores. It's actually a little fascinating how the sounds sync up with each other when the two sleep in close proximity. As quietly as she can, Byleth gets up and grabs her silver sword. If she was up, she might as well get some practice in. Besides, working with her blade was always calming. Dimitri, one day he will understand that she's right. If they were together, it would cause so many problems. Based on how many of them so quickly believed he'd murdered his uncle, with little more than Cornelia's word, there were probably numerous lords who were already against him. The king marrying a low-born mercenary would not help matters. Even lords who had nothing against Dimitri might turn against him for marrying someone who isn't of noble birth. Dimitri loves his people and kingdom, and she would never ask something of him that would put his duties at risk. Byleth does not know much about politics, so she won't claim to understand the full ramifications. However, she knows there will be fallout if their relationship stays romantic in nature. It might work if he wasn't king, but she would never ask that of him either. That's not even taking into consideration her relationship with Suthies. She's getting nowhere with this. Byleth has more important things to worry about right now. She needs to figure out what her next course of action should be. Her father has accepted a commission in the Empire that they would be leaving for soon. It will be a long job and would probably last until the war that she knew was on the horizon. After that they'd probably be hired into the Adrestian army. From there she could probably send Dimitri letters with information. The immediate things to figure out are how can she ensure they get to Dimitri and arranging a way to make certain that he knows they are from her if she doesn't sign her name. Byleth goes through her stances, running scenarios through her mind. Before war breaks out, just sending regular letters should suffice. She could encourage Dmitri to find and recruit Yuri. Their former friend should be able to ensure her letters find their location, given his spy network across Adrestia. She should also write the letters in code. They used such methods in the last war, so Dmitri should be able to decipher them. Seeing him at the throne to deliver reports, while safer, is not a good idea. She's only seen him 2 times, and Byleth has already nearly given in to her feelings. She needs to keep their interactions to a minimum. This will also hopefully help Dmitri too. If he doesn't see her, it will be easier to get over her. Maybe Byleth could use a seal on her letters to indicate they are from her. What symbol should the seal bear though? It has to be something Dmitri would recognize that no one else would associate with her. She won't be of much use as a spy of sorts if her letters are intercepted by an enemy or not trusted by their intended recipient. The image of a ring flashes in her mind. Would that work? Dmitri said he remembered them getting engaged in the Goddess Tower. He would more than likely remember the ring she gave him. The design on it was simple, so it shouldn't be difficult to have a seal made in its image. It would be easier if she had the ring, but that would be complicated. Byleth cannot ask her father to give it to her. Geralt doesn't know that she is aware of the ring's existence, as he hasn't shown it to her yet. She could try drawing it, but she's not the best artist. It is a rather simple design though, so maybe with a bit of practice. Eloise had mentioned her mother recently, so maybe her father will bring up the subject on his own. That would make things simpler. Hey kid, what are you doing? Geralt's voice broke through her thoughts. When had her father woken up? I woke up early and wanted to get some practice in before we got going. There probably wouldn't be much time for training while they were traveling. She needed to get stronger with the war coming. Byleth also thinks she might have retained the magic she'd learned previously, though she could only practice that while alone. She hadn't known magic before meeting Dmitri and the others, so it would be suspicious otherwise. Did you have one of your strange dreams again? In a way. Byleth isn't sure how else to classify seeing Dmitri at the throne. Which one was it? The war or the sleeping girl? Geralt sounds worried. Does he suspect her connection to Sothis? Byleth has always wondered about that. Rhea had done something to terrify him enough to fake her death and run. He must have some suspicions. It's ironic. Now that she can ask him about all the questions that have been boiling within her since before she watched him die, and she doesn't even know how to start. Some days, even as she marvels at seeing him again, Byleth feels like she's wasting the opportunities given to her. I saw the girl again. Well, dream or no dream, it's time to pack everything away, kid. Come give us a hand, it'll be a long trip to Adrestia. I'd prefer not to travel at night, so if we want to make good time, we need to leave soon. All right. She'll just have to do her planning while they travel. Chapter 3, Horns of War. While his days continue as usual, Dmitri both dreads and eagerly anticipates going to bed. Usually, he dreams of the times that Byleth was his professor or army strategist, and he knows, from the little he's been able to get from her, that it is much the same for Byleth. That has to mean that she's thinking of him as much as he's thinking of her. Byleth said it herself, the dreams would cease if he stopped thinking about her. Would the reverse not be the same? While the memories haunt him, it is when Byleth is actually there, sharing them with him, that he never wants them to end. He knows she still loves him. Before she realizes it is actually him and not just a memory, Byleth is always happy to see him. Always so willing to speak, to touch, to simply be with him. If Dmitri is wrong though, he just needs to see her in real life again, then he can prove that they still belong together. All the better if he can end the war before 5 years pass. That will demonstrate how much better he is than he used to be. That their lives together will be better than what they could have been before. It is rare that he dreams of the throne, but when he does, Byleth is always distant. Delivering reports and at least attempting to refuse to have any other conversation. He can weather her efforts to put distance between them though. He knows she is only doing so because she thinks she's protecting them both. He loves her for it, for all that he wishes she would cease. The next year goes by in a blur for Dmitri. He spends much of his time planning and preparing for the war that inevitably broke out, What remained of his time was spent on his beloved. Thinking about her, dreaming about her, and planning to return her to his side. Or for him to return to her side, he doesn't care which it is. Unfortunately, there isn't much planning he can do. The best way that he can think of to peacefully go about marrying the love of his life is to recruit her into his army and have her and/or her father gain some kind of prestige through their service. Another potential issue is that he knows nothing of her father's past besides the fact he was once a knight of Syros. He doesn't even know why Geralt quit and became a mercenary instead. Dmitri needs more information before he can do any substantial plotting. The best course of action to get said information would be to ask Byleth, but there are obstacles in the way of that as well. It is entirely possible that she would not even know the answer to his questions. Before everything changed, Dmitri remembers her lamenting how her father never told her anything. If Byleth did have the information he was seeking, she would undoubtedly deny him. Sadly, Byleth hadn't softened to the idea of them being together. During the times they've interacted, she reaffirmed her belief that because of their respective positions they couldn't be together. No argument he's tried had been successful yet. That was fine though, he'll get there eventually. His arguments have admittedly not been the best, with him mostly trying to assure her that things will work out with no proof for his claims or strategy to offer up. Dmitri is sure he will be more convincing once he has a more fleshed out plan. Recruiting Geralt's mercenaries is currently his best bet. It will give his allies a chance to view Byleth as more than a dangerous enemy. They will get to know her both while fighting alongside her, and by interacting with her during everyday activities at camp. His friends will see her as Byleth, not the Ashen Demon, as they once did. It will also let him be physically near her again. Being away from her is already intolerable, he's not sure how long he will last as he is. Furthermore, seeing him every day might soften Byleth to their situation. Surely she must feel the longing to be together as well, even if she doesn't see a relationship as possible. For now, Dmitri will just have to settle for reading the letters of information Byleth sends him. They are rather impersonal, but he hoards them anyway. She rarely mentions herself or personal subjects, but the glimpses he gets of her within the various reports are enough. Most of the letters keep him updated about the locations of the former Black Eagles and Ashen Wolves students. Dmitri is sure this is done because she hopes they can be recruited instead of killed. If doing so will please his beloved, then Dmitri will gladly recruit them whenever the opportunity arises. Not only that, but he and his former classmates had become friends with the other students. While those bonds unfortunately no longer exist, it would be nice to give them an opportunity to grow and flourish once more. He remembers having frequent discussions about Cornelia and his stepmother with Happy. One of Byleth's most recent letters contained a warning about Count Rowe. The man's loyalty is mostly directed at himself, as he wants to defect to the Empire but is waiting to see what becomes of the rebellion Lord Leneto is once again leading. Dmitri cannot bring himself to be surprised by this. Dmitri had hoped his efforts would have quelled Ash's adoptive father's rage, but it seems he's failed. At least they will be given Arianrhod should they defeat Leneto. Dmitri isn't sure how Byleth is getting all this information, but he desperately hopes she is safe. He wouldn't be able to bear it if she got hurt. A rather naive thought, he knows. They are at war, they are all going to be injured, and Byleth is an incredible swordsman, but if anything serious happens to her, Dmitri knows his reaction will be explosive. Dmitri dreams of the training grounds at Garag Mach Monastery. They are surprisingly empty, but he doesn't mind. He's getting in some alone time with Byleth. The two of them are sitting on one of the benches drinking some water. It is nice just sitting here, relaxing with his beloved after a good spar. Byleth leaned onto his shoulder. We should probably go get something to eat soon. The others will worry if we don't. Her eyes were closed, and she looked so peaceful. Dmitri leaned back into her. He could easily take a nap like this. It was so nice, just being with her. He moved his head a bit to the side and caught a whiff of smoky campfires. That caused him to nearly jump up. Byleth felt him move and gazed at him curiously. Is something wrong? When Dmitri had these memory dreams, things were not exactly as they originally were. It was as if his senses were muted. Colors weren't as vibrant, smells weren't as strong, and even his beloved's warmth was diminished. Byleth was warm against him, and her scent didn't smell as if it was faded or dulled. This wasn't just his dream. Nothing is wrong, beloved. Though he feared the dream would soon end. Byleth gasped and moved so she wasn't leaning on him. This isn't just my dream, is it? No, but that doesn't mean that it has to end quite yet. Dimitri keeps looking ahead. His last look at Byleth's face was when she was happy and content. He wants to keep that image in his mind for a little longer. I think it does. Byleth sighs. The more we indulge, the harder it will be. Dimitri feels her warmth disappear as his surroundings slowly vanish. Dimitri knew that Byleth and her father had been hired by the Adrestian Empire. Byleth had previously reported that to him in a letter. So, he was aware that there was a good chance he'd encounter them on the battlefield. What he wasn't expecting was to find Geralt's mercenaries amongst Lenito's forces. Logically, he had known that the man was still alive, but seeing Geralt in person had still been a shock. Sad as he is about the situation, seeing the Blade Breaker in action made him happy. Byleth's father was still alive. He can clearly remember his beloved's reaction when he was killed by Kronia. Wait. He saw Kroina when his class rescued Monica. Kroina killed Byleth's father. Kroina hurt his beloved. Kroina helped trap his beloved in Solin's spell. That witch was still alive. Maybe Byleth would like her head as a gift. It shouldn't be too difficult to assign someone to find the assassin. He'd be more than willing to strike the killing blow himself. On a more pleasant note, Dimitri also got his first look in a while at the Ashen Demon in action. She was as mesmerizing as he remembered. She was so skilled with her blade that despite all the soldiers he saw swarming her, she incapacitated his troops whenever possible. He had even gotten the chance to engage her in combat. It was exhilarating. Typically, Dimitri has to hold back in combat, even when fighting an enemy, lest his brute strength leaves a grisly sight. Not with Byleth though. Between her skills and crest, Byleth could easily match him. Dimitri suspects that in a no-holds-barred fight, that Byleth would easily win. It had been so long since they had last sparred, and it was as enjoyable as he dreamed. The whole world melted away and it was just them, trading blows. She had even gotten him in the shoulder. It was nothing serious, but the area was still sore. When he's sparring with his friends, they tend to hold back with him more than each other because of his status as king, but his beloved hadn't cared about that. She never had. It was glorious. Byleth had to flee when the battle was over and her side lost, but Dimitri was just thankful that he got to see her in the waking world for once. Who knew holding back in battle without making it obvious would be such a challenge? In a way, Byleth missed just being the Ashen Demon. Back then it didn't matter who she cut down as long as they were opposing her mission. Things are more complicated now. At least she got one good fight out of the battle. Dimitri could still hit like a wyvern. It had been fun. It wasn't often that she faced an opponent who could make her work for any success. Dimitri had always been one of her preferred sparring partners. He was stronger, but she was faster. He'd met her blow for blow. Dimitri looked like he'd been having fun too. It doesn't matter though. They can never be together in that way again, lingering on those memories will only bring pain. Dimitri doesn't seem willing to accept that fact, which doesn't make it any easier. She needs to be strong, for both their sakes. Dimitri dreams of that night in the rain. When he wakes up, he can still remember how warm Byleth's hands were. He would give anything to hold them again. She told him to live for what he believed in. Even after he had treated her and everyone they cared about so horribly, she was still there for him. What he believed in now was her. That the two of them could help Fodlan regain its footing and get to be happy together. They hadn't shared a dream in so long, and he missed her terribly. Seeing his beloved on the battlefield, while exhilarating, wasn't enough. He doesn't want their meetings in the waking world to only be when the Empire and Kingdom armies clash. Dimitri wants to see her every day. To share meals together, to sit together, to train together. He just wants to be with her. Dimitri knows he's a wretch who doesn't deserve such happiness, but he can't help but long for such things. Dimitri was spending another day behind a desk. When he was younger, he'd imagined that being a king would be more active. Now he knows better, it's a lot of sitting around, debating with people, and doing paperwork. It's only because of the war that he's as active as he is. Despite selfishly wishing to go out and do something, Dmitri will stay at his desk and work. He will work all day and into the night if he has to. Didu had come in more than once to get him to eat, but there was too much to do to spare much time for such things. He'll eat enough to function properly, and that should be sufficient. His people and kingdom are more important than he is. He was just finishing one of the many stacks of paperwork when he hears a knock at the door, causing him to look up. A soldier is standing at attention in the doorway. Dmitri waved the man in. Is there a problem? Has there been an attack or something similar? He hasn't heard a commotion outside, but it is still possible. The Sadr shook his head, as he approached Dmitri's desk. No, Your Majesty, nothing of the sort has happened. The Sadr, a letter, this just arrived. The seal used to close it was one you labeled as important. The soldier then showed Dmitri the seal. It was a very familiar stylized flower. Byleth. Dmitri stood up so fast that his chair toppled over. It didn't sound as if it broke, so he paid it no mind. Thank you for bringing it to me. Dmitri took the offered letter. His hands weren't quite shaking, but it felt as though they soon would be. You may return to your other duties. The soldier bowed and then left. Now that he was alone, Dmitri took the time to brush his thumb over the seal before breaking it open. The letter, like always, was written in the code that they had used in the previous war. A code that, as far as everyone else was aware, never existed. His beloved was always so smart. Dmitri leaned against his desk, and before long, he deciphered the message hidden within the letter. It wasn't terribly long, but the information was very important. Arianrod to be attacked by troops from former Arundel territory. Geralt's mercenaries to be present. Bernadetta will participate. Death Knight will be there. Day unknown. That's not good. Such an attack will take time to set up, and it is likely that he will get similar reports from other sources. It should not be difficult to make others believe they need to return to Arianrod. He cannot do nothing in the face of such news. Not only is it an important location to keep under their control, but his beloved will be there as well. Thankfully, Dmitri had been correct, as several reports about Imperial troops marching from former Arundel territory came in, and his army soon set off to defend Arianrod. Before they go off to battle though, he needs to have an important conversation with Shay. The last time Byleth appeared on the same battlefield as his friend, Dmitri hadn't known it was going to happen ahead of time. Now that he has a warning, he wants to see what Shay thinks about the possibility of recruiting Geralt's mercenaries. He doesn't want to be disloyal to his friend, but he will not tolerate threats against his beloved. Dmitri just hopes that Shay is amenable to the idea. During the battle, Dmitri sadly did not so much as catch a glimpse of his beloved. In the first leg of the campaign, he put his focus on recruiting Bernadetta and defeating the Death Knight. He had been terrified when word spread that Byleth had been defeated. However, he had been busy at that moment because while Byleth had remained out of his sight, her father had not. The Blade Breaker had been decimating his troops, so Dmitri had gone to put a stop to it. It had been nerve-wracking. Geralt had not been particularly frightening to him before the man had died in his and Byleth's previous lives, but things were different now. Geralt wasn't just a strong fighter and former captain of the Knights of Syros, he was the father of the love of his life. Even if Geralt wasn't aware of it yet, this was the father of the woman he wanted to marry. They do share a brief moment of relief when word spreads that despite losing in battle, Byleth rallied and returned. Fighting Geralt had been interesting. They were both mounted lancers, so their fighting styles had a number of similarities. Dmitri had been hoping to impress Geralt and had been beyond pleased when the man complimented his army. He wants Geralt to like him. He never got that chance to form any kind of bond with Byleth's father before, and he knows his beloved would want her father to have a good opinion him. It was only after the battle that Dmitri had been told about the transformation the Ashen Demon had gone through. He had gone to one of the medical tents to see Shay while he was being treated for his injuries. It was really strange, Dmitri. Shay looked utterly exhausted. We were fighting when she suddenly disappeared. 1 second, she was in front of me, and I was about to strike her. Dmitri stared for a moment. Then I blinked, and she was gone. She reappeared a moment later and it was like the Ashen Demon was a different person. Even her eyes and hair had changed color. That sounded awfully familiar to Dimitri. He remembers Byleth's hair and eyes going from blue to green after Solon had attacked her. He'd never found out why her coloring had changed now that he thought about it. Dimitri will just have to ask Byleth about it the next time they share a dream. For all that she's been standoffish in their other meetings, she will surely see the sense in sharing such information. Chapter 4, Hidden Enemies. Byleth is feeling a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, having Suthi's back is unspeakably wonderful. On the other, Byleth isn't exactly happy that her friend took over her body. What was that all about? How did you do that? Why did you try to kill Shay? We could have just subdued him or something. He's Dimitri's friend, I don't want to kill him. Well, that's a fine hello. Sorry, I really have missed you. I know, and you have every right to be upset. It's just Shay, it's a lot to go over and I lost sense for a few minutes. Suthies. We will talk about it later, I promise. It'll be a long story and I'd prefer to not risk being interrupted. Sure, enough. Byleth could see her father and Eloise approaching. Her conversation with Suthies would have to wait. Now she just had to pretend to be surprised about her change of hair and eye color. Hey kid, are you alright? I am fine. I was just thinking about what happened today. If she told them about Suthies, it would only cause Geralt to worry. Geralt looked at her appraisingly. It is strange, your eyes and hair both changed color, I've never seen anything like it before. He shook his head. We can talk about that more later though. Since we lost today, we'll probably have to move on soon. If they leave, she won't be able to send Dimitri as much useful and accurate information. I am fine with staying on the battlefield, using my sword will make things feel more normal. It's not like she doesn't understand where her physical changes came from. She would prefer to not dwell on it and get others to stop seeing it as strange. Alright, but if you start feeling off in any way, you need to tell me. If we don't stay vigilant, things could unexpectedly take a turn for the worse. It is nice to see how much he worries about you. Byleth nodded in agreement. I will. Things are going to get complicated soon. Geralt sighed. We're not just dealing with the kingdom, the church is also participating in the war. Not that I'm surprised given the close ties the two have. Byleth isn't surprised either, Dimitri would never turn his back on allies. Things will certainly not be easy, but I would follow my captain to the ends of the earth. Eloise held up a clenched fist. I will not hold back against my former colleagues. Thanks, Eloise. We've taken the Empire's contract, so we have to follow through, regardless of who we end up facing. Something seemed off about her father's tone. Does that bother you? Byleth can remember his warnings about Lady Rhea when they were at Garreg Mach. Geralt chuckled. You've gotten too good at reading me, kid. I have history with the church, which I would like to keep as that, history. That time in my life is over and I'd prefer not to bring it back. He is probably worried about Lady Rhea finding you. We will have to tread carefully. Now that all that is out in the open, why don't we go get some dinner? Eloise laughs. I'm sure the three of us will turn as green as Byleth in envy if everyone else takes all the rations. Geralt snorts. That's a good one, Eloise. He nodded at her. Let's go eat then. Byleth looked over at her father. What did you think of the Kingdom Army today? You fought them on your own for a portion of the battle. The troops were well trained. Geralt led the way to their campsite. I did engage the king in combat for a short time, he was a talented lancer and equestrian. His skills could use some polishing, but with more experience under his belt he will be a force by himself on the battlefield. It took a lot to impress her father. Dimitri must have made quite the impact. Something tells me that was the boy's aim. When he goes to sleep that night, Dimitri finds himself before the throne again. The shadows that had previously been obscuring the figure were gone. He can see a little girl with green hair sitting on it, but all he cares about is that Byleth is there too. He rushes up to where she is standing, trying to see if she is injured. His worry must be obvious, as she fixed him with a blank stare. I am fine, Dimitri, I did not sustain any lasting injuries. Dmitri relaxes a little at that. That is a relief to hear, beloved. He reaches out and takes her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. But why did your hair and eyes change color again? That would be my doing. Dmitri looked up at the throne, to see that the girl was staring right at him. It's nice to properly meet you, King Dmitri. The girl shoots him and Byleth a playful smirk. Byleth shakes her head in apparent exasperation, taking her hand out of his. Really? The girl waved Byleth off. Of course. It has been a very long time since I've had anyone but you to speak with. Dmitri was very confused. Hello. The girl smiled. See, he's already much more polite that you are Byleth. May I ask who you are? Dmitri felt awkward asking the question since the girl clearly knew who he was. I am the end and the beginning. I am the Prague dot. Please stop with the dramatics, we don't have time for that right now. Byleth sounded tired. Dmitri immediately leads her over to the stairs going up to the throne. It was probably an indication of how fatigued she was that she didn't protest. He and the girl shared a worried look as he sat down next to Byleth. Please, beloved, just sit. Even if it's just for a little while. She might not have been seriously injured during her clash with Shay, but it clearly had an impact on her, nonetheless. I am fine. Despite repeating her words from earlier, Byleth's tone was weaker than it had been. No, the girl had gotten off the throne and was approaching them. The boy is right. You need rest and we have much to discuss. She was looking at Byleth in concern. Byleth looked like she was going to protest, but thankfully relaxed her posture instead. Okay. Dmitri felt relieved at that. Now, I believe I was in the middle of introducing myself before I was rudely interrupted. The girl lightly smacked Byleth on the shoulder, who snorted in response. My name is Suthis. Suthis? You mean you're the progenitor goddess? The goddess your church worships? Yes. The goddess seemed to find his shock amusing. Byleth and I have been together since she was a newborn. Suthis reached over and brushed some of the bangs out of Byleth's face. The last time Byleth's coloring changed, it was because the two of us merged. I didn't see any other way to get her, and therefore, the both of us out of that Zahara's spell. This time it was on account of me fully awakening. Now that he was looking, Dmitri could see some similarities in their appearances. Byleth's hair was a lighter shade of green, but their eyes were now strikingly similar. Unfortunately, while being my vessel grants Byleth power, it also puts her in a certain amount of danger. Suthis sits on the steps above them. The Agarthans want me gone and have no issues with accomplishing their goal by killing Byleth. Now that her hair is green, they will know. She shuddered. That is if the crest of flames hasn't already tipped them off. Byleth put her hand on Suthis's shoulder. I've been careful to keep my crest hidden. How exactly did the two of you become connected, and who are the Agarthans? Dmitri always knew his beloved had a strong connection to the goddess, but he had never suspected this. Byleth shrugged. We don't really know how this happened. All we have are theories. The Agarthans are not to be taken lightly. They are the remains of a once larger civilization. To keep things short, they believe they are superior to everyone and are entitled to rule, well, everything. In the name of that belief, they've committed many atrocities. Suthis looked him in the eyes. One of their favorite tricks is replacing people. So, Solon and Kroina are, perhaps even Cornelia, if all the personality changes he was told she'd gone through were accurate. Yes, and we expect there are many more that we are currently unaware of. What I'm worried about is how they will likely target Byleth now. Suthis brought a hand up to her face. Being in the Imperial Army will not make things any safer. Dmitri felt a jolt of fear. Byleth was already in enough danger as it is, he doesn't want to consider any peril added to that. Beloved, leave the Imperial Army and come to mine. Dmitri took hold of both her hands. You wouldn't be completely safe, but it would be better. Dmitri. Please. We could be together again. Dmitri tightened his grip. I could protect you and we could keep each other safe on the battlefield. Dmitri. I love you and I can't stand the idea of you being in danger from some ancient group that hates the goddess. If anything were to happen to her. Dimitri. Byleth ripped her hands from his and gave him a firm shake. You need to calm down. How could he calm down? People might want to hunt down and kill the love of his life. This is the ideal time to be worked up. I cannot go to your encampment. Byleth looked even more tired. That would just call attention to me, which is something we don't want. For all the notoriety that the moniker Ashen Demon gets me, I am still just a mercenary. Mercenaries do not matter in the grand scheme of things. I am beneath the notice of most of the people I interact with. Most people do have a low opinion of mercenaries. However, is such an assumption truly worth risking her life? As long as I keep my head down and remain quiet, most people would think my hair has always been green, even if they saw me last week. There's another piece of information Byleth should probably tell Dimitri. It might also help him see reason. She and Suthies might not have had long to talk before Dimitri arrived, but they did go over a couple of things. Primarily what effect Suthies' presence might have on her body. That knowledge, along with the things she'd read in her father's journal, have led her and her friend to some conclusions about their connection. Dimitri had looked overwhelmed earlier when Suthies introduced herself. Byleth had gotten to know Suthies before either of them knew about her being a goddess. Byleth has never really been a member of the church, so Suthies had not been a big deal for her beyond the oddity of having a person living in her head. It was different for Dimitri, who grew up under the teachings of the church, but he was likely focusing on her to deal with it. Hopefully her news will give him something to further concentrate on. There's more information you should know. Suthies, likely guessing what Byleth was referring to, ascended the steps back to her throne. It wasn't complete privacy, but it was the closest they could reasonably get to it. It's about some other side effects being Suthies' vessel, and I suspect my lineage, have on my body. Dimitri took her hand again. What is it? Dimitri and his bleeding heart. Her news probably won't even scare him off, will it? Byleth should still tell him. I'm not completely human. Byleth takes a deep breath. The words are harder to form than she thought they would be. I can pass for human, but there are some differences. The biggest is my lifespan. Dimitri lifts his free hand towards her. When Byleth doesn't object, he places it on the side of her face. And what would that difference be? I don't know by how much, but I'm probably going to outlive everyone who is alive right now. Why is she letting him touch her like this? Giving into it will not make their inevitable separation any easier. Dimitri gives her a concerned look. You don't know that for a fact. In 100 years, when you are dead and gone, I'll likely not look any different than I do now. Dimitri deserves someone who will be able to grow old with him. It's not just their positions that are keeping them apart. They can't have a real life together. Dimitri is silent for a moment before tightening his grip on her hand. Is there any way we can get around that? He never gives up. Byleth leans into the hand on her cheek. I don't know. Though I am reasonably certain my father is well over 100. Dimitri's eyes widened. How old? I don't know the exact number, but I read his journal after he died, and people are always commenting that even if they haven't seen him in decades, that he still looks the same. Byleth takes another breath. I think Lady Rhea gave him her blood after he saved her and almost died in the process. Dimitri gives her a hopeful look. Could we not do that? Byleth takes a brief look at Suthies before turning her gaze to Dimitri. I'm wary of the idea. She continues before Dimitri can interrupt. My father got a crest from the experience, you already have one. What if giving you my blood kills you instead of granting you a longer life? Byleth knows from Lysithia's experiences that one person was not meant to house multiple crests. She wants him to have as long a life as possible, even if it will be a raindrop in the ocean compared to hers. Even if they were successful in extending Dimitri's life, Byleth isn't sure if that would be the best thing. She doesn't want to condemn him to all the downsides that he's likely not considering. He already deals with enough between the nightmares and ghosts. That's not even considering the guarantee of outliving all your friends and loved ones. Dimitri may like the idea of spending untold centuries with her, but he would lose everything he currently has for a life that he might never truly enjoy. She doesn't want that for him. Dimitri had not expected that. How could Lady Rhea's blood have granted Gerald such a long life? Would his beloved really not have aged even after a century had passed? What a lonely existence must that be? Not that any of that truly matters. I don't care. For all the hardships it might bring, spending centuries or even millennia working to make his beloved happy sounds like the most perfect existence there could be. He surely doesn't deserve such happiness, but he wants nothing more than to give it to Byleth. We can figure out a way around the potential risks. Byleth scooted away from him. No, I will not put your life at risk. Especially, not for something like this. She was nearly glaring at him. Please, beloved, she seemed to tense at that, we can talk about this. Before Byleth could respond, their surroundings faded away and Dmitri opened his eyes. He was back in his tent at his army's current encampment. Back in his cold, lonely bed. Dmitri wishes he had slept a little longer. He and Byleth hadn't gotten the chance to finish their conversation. Additionally, they had been so distracted by everything that Byleth and the goddess did not get the chance to tell him about the theories they have about their connection. Dmitri turned over in his bed. Byleth would outlive him. She'd probably outlive the grandchildren many of his friends would eventually have. If the two of them had children, would they inherit their mother's lifespan, or would she watch them grow old and die, all while not having visibly aged? Dmitri does not wish for his beloved to go through such an existence alone. She said she suspected that Suthies was only partially responsible for her long life, the other contribution being her lineage. Was she referring to her father, her mother, or both? Dmitri can still remember seeing Satri Eisner in Abyss before Aelfric had used the chalice. Despite having been dead for 20 years, her corpse had not decayed. It had been a haunting sight. Regardless, Dmitri wishes to join her. He just wants to always be at her side. Nothing could ever bring him more happiness, but perhaps a wretch like him doesn't deserve such things. Once Dmitri made himself presentable, he exited his tent to join Rodrigue and Dida for a quick breakfast. Dmitri would prefer to skip eating and continue towards Fhirdiad, but the others deserved to have a break. They went from battle to marching with little chance to rest as is. As he walks through the small camp they'd made the night before, he sees his troops relaxing and eating their meager provisions. Maybe they will be able to restock on supplies while they are in the capital. They should reach their destination soon. The people could be in danger, and he needs to be there to protect them. They are his people, it is his honor and duty to see to their safety. Dmitri also wants to keep Fhirdiad safe so he and his beloved will one day have a secure place to live. Things had gone terribly wrong when they reached Fhirdiad. It had all been a trick. While Sreng had attacked, there had been no invasion. To make matters worse, soon after they arrived, Cornelia and the Western lords had arrived at the city's gates. In the face of their strange weapons, and in fear of the lives of the citizens, Dmitri had surrendered. Before doing so he had sent Didu, Rodrigue, and Gustav away. He did not want them at the mercy of their enemies as well. They had not been happy with his orders but had ultimately conceded. Dmitri hates Cornelia. He wants to rip her to pieces. He had been resigned during their conversation initially. Dmitri was used to threats and was well aware that Cornelia was a horrible person. Before he and Byleth had had to redo years of their lives, he'd killed Cornelia when they had liberated Fhirdiad. He was looking forward to killing her again. What had broken his composure was the interruption from a soldier. He came in with a report that the kingdom army was approaching. But more importantly, a target had been identified. Dmitri's blood had run cold when a second report of a mercenary whose hair had recently turned green was also given. Dmitri immediately knew who they are talking about. The fear Suthies had expressed had come to pass. Byleth's connection to the goddess was, if not known, at least speculated on. This just further made Dmitri believe that Cornelia was an Agarthan. They liked to replace people, and Cornelia's likes and dislike, even her personality had completely changed, seemingly overnight. Why else would she go from saving the royal family from death to plotting to get rid of them? Then there were the assassination attempts, and the coups she participated in. There was the failed one with his uncle a couple of years prior and the one from before. The latter had resulted in the loss of his eye and forcing him to be on the run for 5 years. If not for that, he is certain that he would have given Byleth a much warmer welcome than threatening her and accusing her of being a spy when they met in the Goddess Tower. He had been so awful to her back then. Dmitri had thought her to be lying when she claimed to have been sleeping during the 5 years of war, and then dragged her off the fight bandits. If their friends hadn't arrived, he's not sure what would have happened. He is still astounded that she not only forgave him but came to return his love. But he's letting his mind run wild. Dmitri needs to focus. He already knew Cornelia was a threat, now he is more aware of what she's after. Sitting here might keep his people safe, but he needs to find some way to warn Byleth about the possible danger. He cannot trust that he will see her in a shared dream anytime soon. Those happen too sporadically for him to rely upon. Chapter 5, Fishing for Answers. There is fighting spreading throughout the streets of Fhirdiad. His people and friends are fighting for survival, for their country, for him. And what is he doing in response? Nothing. He is doing nothing. It is a disgrace, but what else can he do? Dmitri is torn between his worries. His people, his friends, his beloved. He doesn't want anyone to be hurt. If he stays put, his people will be safe, and his friends could retreat. If he tries to leave, he could stop Cornelia from ever getting near Byleth, but his people and friends could be slaughtered because of it. At the same time, he doubts that his friends will surrender. They will keep fighting until they win. Dmitri is very fortunate to be surrounded by so many incredible people. They must all be so disappointed in him. His friends and people are risking their lives to save him and keep their homes safe, and he's doing nothing to aid them. No wonder Byleth doesn't think they can be together. He is a wretch who is undeserving of kindness. Byleth, Felix, and the others would be better off without him. In the end Dudu, Felix, and Shay convinced him to fight back. Fearing for his people and beloved caused Dmitri to be paralyzed. He put so much value in everything above himself that he almost lost all that he cared about. Byleth always used to warn him about not putting enough importance on his own life and well-being. It seems he has yet to fully absorb the lesson. It was naive to assume that Cornelia wouldn't have done anything to the kingdom's citizens after she finished with him. She hadn't treated them well the last time he'd lived through these years, why would it be any different now? He also regrets that Cornelia escaped. However, now he is almost certain she is an Agarthan, so he'll have to keep that in mind. There's also Byleth to consider. His beloved can protect herself, but Dmitri is worried that Cornelia and her ilk will go after her. Dmitri can of course warn Byleth of the potential danger, but if his suspicions are correct, more than just Cornelia will be after her soon. As powerful as she is, Byleth is only one person, and she has her limits. Her father, Alois, and the other mercenaries will be there, and that is a bomb on his nerves, but Dmitri would feel so much better about things if he could help protect her too. His indecisiveness almost caused great harm to Faerghus, he cannot let that happen to Byleth. Byleth is sitting on the docks waiting for a fish to take her bait. It has been a while since she's gotten the chance to do this, and it's nice. She can hear the activity of the dining hall behind her, but it's peaceful on the dock. It doesn't take long for her to hear footsteps approaching her. She doesn't even need to ask who it is. "Hello Professor, have you had any bites yet?" Dmitri sits down next to her, their legs dangling on the ledge. "Not as of yet." Byleth gives her line a gentle tug. It doesn't really matter if she catches anything, but the activity is still one she enjoys. Dmitri chuckles. "I'm sorry to hear that." One of his knees nudges hers. Byleth readjusts herself so their legs are pressed against each other. "It's nice just sitting here with him." "It's fine, my father used to say that the fish don't always bite, but that just makes them tastier when they do. One will come eventually, but if it doesn't, I'll just try again later." Dmitri presses further into her side. It's a little too warm, but she doesn't mind. It's when he takes one of her hands to kiss the back of it that she realizes that something is wrong. The bite of the metal that his gauntlet is made of is colder than it should be. Instead of letting go of her hand, which is what he typically did back then, his grip only tightened. Being this close to him, she can also smell the odd mixture of metal and pine that made his unique scent. Byleth already knew she was dreaming, and apparently, she wasn't the only one. She took her hand from his and stood up, paying no more attention to her fishing pole. "Why must you find me like this?" Dmitri's mouth gaped as he realized what was going on. "So, he hadn't known it was really her then. Byleth began to walk away, but Dimitri scrambled after her. Wait please, don't leave so soon. We have nothing to discuss. I've already sent you all the news I currently have and there isn't anything pressing that we need to talk about. She cannot indulge him. Dimitri needs to see reason, clinging to the past will benefit no one. That's all she really is to him at this point. A happy memory he refuses to let go of. Before she can get too far, Dimitri grabs her arm. That is not completely true. The reports you've been sending me have been useful, but for once I carry news for you. While Dimitri doesn't let go, his grip softens. He looks truly worried. Byleth could probably free her arm from his hold if she attempted it. What news do you have? She doesn't move. I believe the Cornelia is one of the Agarthans we spoke about before. More importantly, when I spoke with her, while she was holding her dyad hostage, Cornelia received a very worrying report. Dimitri took a small step closer to her and took hold of her other arm as well. A report about a mercenary whose hair had recently turned green. He's right. That is worrying. She'll have to sleep with one eye open and figure out a way to warn Geralt of the impending danger. She could always just tell him that she's been getting looks that make her feel weary. That should be unusual enough to put him on his guard. Thank you for the information. I will be sure to keep an eye out for an attack. Byleth knew this would happen eventually. She and Suthies had been discussing potential plans in preparation. Her friend was still avoiding giving an explanation for her initial actions after waking up. Instead, they had been focused on more dangerous worries. Beloved, she froze at that, I know you likely already have plans in mind, but please consider joining me. I'm not foolish enough to think things will be easy for us, but we are stronger together. But I just want to help protect you. You're going out of your way to assist me. You are willing to put yourself in danger in the name of aiding my army, why can't I do the same? He sounded so pained. So please, just return to me. With a little preparation I'm certain that we can come up with a way for you and your mercenary band to join me without drawing too much attention. He pulled her closer, leaned down so their eyes were level with each other, and their lips were just inches apart. Byleth woke up with a start. She took a quick look outside of her small tent and saw no one walking around, before flopping back on her bedroll. It was still early so everyone was likely still asleep. Byleth ran a hand through her hair, in an attempt to calm herself. Why was that not getting any easier? Well, what has you so agitated this fine morning? Byleth thinks there is a slight giggle within Suthies' tone. Whatever could you have been dreaming about? Like you don't know. I honestly don't. Unless you visit me on the throne, I do not have access to your dreams. Though based on your reaction and the clear embarrassment I can feel radiating off you, you must have seen the boy again. Suthies is actually giggling now. You always get so flustered when the real Dimitri shares a dream with you. Byleth gets up and heads towards the river a little way away. The water was clean and splashing some of it on her face might calm her some. What about you? Me? You're hiding things too. You still haven't told me why you want to kill Dimitri's mercenary friend so much. It had been bothering Byleth, but she hadn't wanted to push her friend. I want to tell you. It's just, the story is not a pleasant one. I need time to figure out what words to use. Byleth paused by the riverbank. Suthies sounded very shaken up. That's not normal for her normally snarky friend. All right, take the time you need. Just please don't take too long. Byleth cups her hands into the cool water. You were right though, I did see Dimitri. Oh, and what happened? He thinks Cornelia is an Agarthan and she received a report about a mercenary whose hair had turned green. We will have to tread lightly then. Of course. Your Majesty, may we speak? Dimitri looked up from his paperwork to see Rodrigue and Dida looking at him. Is something wrong? Dimitri didn't think there was any pressing business to discuss, but perhaps something he wasn't aware of had happened. No, nothing is wrong. Rodrigue shook his head. It's just that Dida and I were concerned about some of your recent behavior. His behavior? I'm not sure I quite understand what you mean. You've been distracted lately, Your Majesty. Didu placed a bowl with some stew in it on his desk. Oh, was it time for lunch already? It has become increasingly often that I come to bring you meals, only to find you looking off in thought. Sometimes you barely acknowledge my presence. Today alone you skipped lunch and now have almost missed dinner. Didu pushed the bowl closer to Dmitri. You have also been wearing yourself more thinly than usual. You've been eating less and instead of sleeping you've been looking through reports of skirmishes involving mages using dark magic. It's not only that. Rodrigue looked concerned. I am aware of the letters you've been receiving. The ones with a seal that resembles a flower. Byleth's letters. I've been informed that you ordered the couriers to bring the letters straight to you and to not allow anyone else to look at them. Rodrigue shook his head. I trust your judgment, Dmitri, but I do find it worrying. Dmitri is actually surprised that it took so long for someone to question him about the reports from Byleth. Those letters are reports I'm receiving from a trusted source. Dmitri doesn't wish to lie to those important to him, but he should still be cautious. I don't want anyone tampering with the seal, to ensure the reports remain intact and secure. It is merely a precaution. We employ numerous spies, why must you be the only one to see these particular reports? Rodrigue did have a valid point. We would just like to understand the situation. Every time you receive one of those reports you call a strategy meeting and present the information. Didu nodded in agreement. We typically have other reports that corroborate with what you are presenting, but the timing is too coincidental. Didu bowed. I will follow any command you give me, Your Majesty. Lord Rodrigue and I just want to ensure that you are being careful. There are many who would use underhanded means to win the war. I understand and appreciate your concern. Dmitri sighed. But my source is very trustworthy, they are loyal, and I know that for a fact. At their questioning looks he continues. She and I have a history. There have been numerous occasions where she could have hurt or killed me if she so desired. He felt his face begin to burn. She is a very skilled swordsman and tactician. Her reports have been very helpful to our efforts. Rodrigue has a thoughtful look on his face. Didu, could you please give me and His Majesty a moment alone? Of course. Didu bows and begins to leave. Dmitri isn't sure he likes the looks either of them are giving him. Once Didu is gone, Rodrigue gives him a careful look. You and your spy, what kind of history do you have? Dmitri cannot tell him the whole truth, he barely believes it himself, but perhaps parts of the truth will be acceptable. I met her while at the officers' academy, we grew close and that's really all there is to it. And the loyalty you say she has, is that really all there is to it? Need there be more? She would never betray me, not intentionally, I know this for a fact. Byleth might be putting walls between them, but it is not out of any negative feelings towards him. I don't doubt you on that, but I get the feeling that's not all there is. That doesn't explain why you put so much stock in their reports. Loyal or not, that doesn't guarantee their information is good. My spy, Dmitri, will have to pick his words carefully, though he wishes he didn't. Byleth deserves more than to be his secret. She's a mercenary who has found work in the Imperial Army. She's working with our enemy. Rodrigue did not sound upset, just curious. Her mercenary band was offered a job, and her captain took it. They don't have any special attachment to Adrestia, it's just a job to them. My spy saw an opportunity to give me information and decided to take it. Dmitri shook his head. I'm not fond of the situation either, but the information she's been sending me has proven very useful. That would make sense, if she's with the Imperial Army, she would be familiar with their movements. Rodrigue gave him a strange look again. What can you tell me about this mercenary spy of yours? Dmitri would never tire of talking about Byleth. She's one of the most skilled swordsmen I've ever seen. She could easily defeat me in combat if she put her mind to it. I suspect next to her, Felix would look like a novice. She is also a master strategist. In a battle she can switch tactics so smoothly when things are going wrong, that it almost seems like she knows what her opponent is going to do next. Now that he's started, Dmitri can't seem to stop. She is also a kind and compassionate person. Too many people think her cold-hearted, but she isn't. She's always worked hard to keep those she cares about safe and happy. As much as people don't recognize it because of her profession, she is a good and wonderful person. Rodrigue smiles at him. If she is such a skilled warrior and tactician, why haven't you brought her into our forces? Keeping her as a spy for too long could be dangerous. If the Imperial generals notice that we are prepared for all the battles she's involved with, they will become suspicious. Dmitri hadn't thought of that. How could he have never considered that kind of danger? I've asked her to join us, on multiple occasions, but she always says no. Not that that will stop Dmitri from asking again. She thinks coming here will complicate things and cause problems, and that she is more useful where she is. Dmitri shakes his head. I've tried to dissuade her of those notions but have been unsuccessful thus far. He will keep trying though, he will never stop trying to prove to his beloved that they can have a life together. Rodrigue chuckled with an odd smile on his face. Thank you for speaking with me, Dmitri. It has been an enlightening conversation. He got up to leave, but before he exited through the doorway Rodrigue looked back at Dmitri. I wish you luck. Once Dmitri was alone again, he grabbed the stew Dudu brought him. It had gone cold, but Dmitri did not mind, it's not like he could taste it anyway. It's a shame he could not share it with Byleth. She loved Dudu's cooking, and he simply loved watching her eat. Even back when she still didn't show much emotion, when Byleth was eating she looked happy. There wasn't much Dmitri wouldn't do to make her smile. He hopes he didn't give too much away while talking with Rodrigue, but it's so easy to talk about Byleth's good qualities. He had barely gotten started when the subject shifted again. Which was probably a good thing, as much as he loves talking about Byleth, he didn't want to ramble to Rodrigue about it. Things would probably be easier if Byleth was more willing to personally interact with him, but Dmitri is sure that will come in time. He just needs to prove that they could overcome any obstacle if they worked together. He has some ideas, all they need is a little refinement. Check the description for the links to the author.